It's 1 to 10, and because I am located here in Copenhagen and not in Finland, I think it's okay to say good morning to everybody. Just a short welcome on behalf of Medicon Valley Alliance. My name is David Muniz-Sepanek. I am the head of business development and public affairs with Medicon Valley Alliance. And of course, I hope and truly believe that you will all enjoy today's quite well-attended webinar with the title Pharmaceuticals and Medical Devices Combined, co-organized with our member company, Innokas Medical. If you get inspired not only by the content of today's webinar, which I'm quite sure you will, but also by the concept, and start to wonder if it would make sense for your company or your organization to organize something similar with Medicon Valley Alliance, feel free to reach out to me. You will find my contact info on our webpage, www.mva.org, and it will also appear on the final goodbye slides after the presentation. If you have questions about Medicon Valley Alliance membership, how to join Medicon Valley Alliance networks, which employees of Medicon Valley Alliance member companies can join free of charge, don't hesitate to give me a call, send me an email. I also encourage you to visit our webpage event calendar, where you will find a number of hopefully interesting online and offline events organized either by Medicon Valley Alliance or by some of our member companies and organizations. And we actually already have another Innokas Medical webinar titled "What Does It Mean to Be ISO 13485 Compliant?" scheduled for the 27th of October. A few practical remarks. It's kind of our household rules for today's webinar. It's pretty much a standard operating procedure, but be aware that you're automatically muted, as you can see. Use the chat for technical questions only, and then we use the Q&A for questions to our speakers. And be aware that this webinar is being recorded, just so that you know that. I guess that's enough said on my part. I am not the reason why you tuned in today. So let's get started. And without further ado, over to Satu Päiväläinen from Innokas Medical, who is actually the reason why you tuned in today. Satu, the floor, or in this case, the screen, is yours.
Thank you, David, and good morning to everybody. I will just put my slides on and hope somebody alerts me to it if they are not showing. Okay, so my name is Satu Päiväläinen. I work at Innokas Medical. We are we're located in Finland and in Estonia. We're a company that gives a home to 200 health tech professionals from pretty much all walks of life. And we do everything from QA/RA consultation to design projects to production. We just do this for our company. We are a legal manufacturer of a medical device, and we also do this as a customer work. We've been doing this since '94, so we have well over 25 years of experience behind us and a great big team. The way we usually work is we aim to do co-creation with our customers. So we walk them through from the very innovative first steps all the way through getting products certified and to the post-market sections. We have a huge competence pool where the core is in our regulatory and quality know-how. So when you're working with Innokas, you're getting the 200 people basically, even though you would have only one point of contact. I work in the quality and regulatory affairs team. There's 10 of us all together, and we all do both internal in-house work and external working with customers on projects. My specialty competence is clinical affairs and IVD products. That's due to the fact that I have a PhD in biochemistry, and I've previously worked as a clinical development lead in aspiring biopharmaceutical company. So kind of landed very naturally on my table, that title. But that's enough from Innakas, and let's get to the topic that you came here to see and hear about. So pharmaceuticals and medical device combined. Two very, very intensive regulatory pathways that are not very easy to tackle when they're put next to each other. Combination products as a field is really growing rapidly, and up to 1 in 3 medicinal products in development are combination products. One of the biggest things that are influencing this is, of course, development of more biological products, which require the devices for them to be administered. But also rise in the incidence of chronic diseases such as diabetes and cancer and respiratory problems, aging population. These are the things that actually lead us all the time towards needing more and more combination products in the markets. So what do these very interesting products have in them? Most of you are probably familiar with either pharmaceutical field or the medical device field. But when you put this together, you need to consider the fact that it will have so many different things you need to take into consideration when assessing performance and safety for them. So pharmaceuticals, it's not only the active ingredient, there's also excipients that bind the pharmaceutical in the proper form, and they have different functions in the product. It will have some kind of a container, whether that be the actual medical device or something that is put into a medical device. That's another thing, but there will be plastic or glass or some kind of material. But with medical devices then, you have the same metal, plastic, glass, some kind of materials. You will also have color. You might have glue, etc. So there can be a lot of things that actually make the device. You also will include many times electronics and software. And since software is really, really taking over now, that is one of the competence areas that not a lot of people are prepared for. It's a very intensively growing area right now. But when we look at the regulatory landscape, the big change that came was the MDR, so medical device regulation that was implemented finally last May. And this regulation actually introduces new responsibilities for the European Medicines Agency and the national competent authorities when they assess certain categories of medical devices. And through that, obviously, it brings a lot more to the table also to the people who are developing the medical devices. So they now have to also discuss with EMA. One thing that if there are anybody on the listening in who have combination products that are already in market, I hope that you are already aware of this, but if you are, it's a heads up for you guys. When your product that has the medical device component needs assessment from your notified body to give the first certification under MDR, it needs to meet all the requirements, and the conformity assessment needs to be full for the first for the actual the first assessment. The notified body is not the only one deciding on this, so they will need to actually submit your full documentation package to the to EMA or to your national authority, whoever is handling this. So be aware of that for the first assessment, you will need to cover all your bases. There may be changes that the MDR brought onto the documentation that your device will need. So even though you would have a legacy device, which by definitions in the guidances will have a little bit leaner pathway, but the documentation they're requesting still needs to be there. The evidence can be referred to as the one that you created during when your product was on the market, but the documentation still needs to follow the technical file description that is in the MDR. And there might be differences in the assessment of the device and its documentation. When you're going through the MDR to find out all things that you need to do, don't exclude the guidances and the parts that are for the notified bodies, because that will give you a lot of information on what they actually have to ask from you. And the third part is that the authority you're talking to may have new information on your substance, your pharmaceutical substance, and that might lead also to different kind of interpretations on, for example, how that will interact with your device. Then there's this something called liability to act upon the body justification that some have used with the directive, and that apparently has been excluded in the MDR. So you really need to tick all the boxes. So what are the regulations and directives governing the field? For the pharmaceuticals, there's a directive and a regulation in place. And for the medical devices right now, it's the 745 from 2017, the MDR regulation, which was supposed to be implemented on 2020, but it was postponed for a year and has now been fully implemented. So if there's, with the MDR, remember, if you are dealing with these things, you're already supposed to have, even though your certification for a medical device would be still valid from the notified body for a while, there are still certain things that you need to already have since the MDR is implemented. So be sure that you've done those things. There's a lot of guidance also available from both EMA and the medical device coordination group for the combination products. So there's just a listing of a few of them. The link that is in the guidance section that actually I think guides you to a page where all of the guidance is listed. So you can find something if you're looking for something specific. There's a lot of it. The actual guidance listed there is on the transitional provision, which is for, like discussed, for those who already have products on the market. That's just an example of what's in there, but they have a lot of guidances and a lot of guidances, a lot more is coming. Other guidance on the matter, the FDA has its own guidances for combination products. Remember, when you're defining your market areas that you will enter with your product, remember to always check their guidance. They might have small differences that you need to meet. There's also a bunch of standards giving guidance to both pharmaceutical and medical device development. And I will encourage you to go through those. At least for the medical device field, following the being compliant to the standards is suggested, and it's really the easiest way for you to prove compliance if the standard is harmonized to the regulation. But Other than, I think, labels and alarms standards, complying to those standards is actually voluntary, at least in the medical device field. So you don't have to use them, but you will need to show very much the same things. So you just make your life a little bit easier if you use them. They will tell you exactly what is looked for in those things, in particular things. So, looking at combination products themselves, there's really a multitude of combinations for them. The easiest division or separation from with them would be which one is the primary actor. So is the primary function deliverer, is that the pharmaceutical or is that the medical device? This will split your decision on what to follow or what kind of regulation to follow. So which one is the primary actor? If you have medicinal product that includes medical device, so these are the what people usually mean by referring to when they refer to combination products. This could be something like disposable inhaler for alleviation of asthma symptoms. It would actually have a pharmaceutical, and the medical device is just there to make possible the use of the medicine. Then again, you might have a medical device that has an ancillary medicinal substance, like a catheter that is coated with antimicrobial elements. So in that case, the medical device, the catheter would be the one who's actually doing the function, but the antimicrobial substance would be something that is preventing adverse events. And I'll come back to this on some of the specifics on the separation of these two. But there's still 2 more boxes in my slide. So what are the other options? There are medical devices that are made of substances that are systematically absorbed. It could be an implant whose primary purpose is to release the medicinal product that is inside it. Because that function would be, the primary function is pharmaceutical. Again, this would go into the pharmaceutical side, as the pharmaceutical regulations directives would be the governing ones in this case. Then there are borderline products, which have a medical function, might have some kind of pharmaceutical functions, but are not fully on the pharmaceutical side. So these kind of, they're borderline, and you can't really, you need to kind of assess one by one what are the actual functions to know which way to go. An example could be eye drops that are intended for alleviation of symptoms caused by environmental factors. So you can see that there's a lot of different combinations that can happen, and a lot of times the separation is difficult. It might be difficult to say which ones should I follow, and by no means understand this as I can choose which one to follow, because ultimately these legislations, regulations refer to each other now. Especially after the implementation of the MDR, there's a very strong reference from both to each other. So they actually are required during assessment. There's actual requirement to consult the other agencies. So if you look at the pharmaceutical side, there's 3 sections that it is split to. when you have a combination of a pharmaceutical and a medical device. You have something that is called integral. This means that you cannot separate the two. So this could be like a pre-filled syringe, where you might have a month's worth of one injection per day pharmaceutical, and then you just dispose of it after you've used it for a month. So that could be one of the a fairly clear example of this. Well, when you do this, when you do an integral product, when it comes to, obviously you will need to comply with everything that is necessary on the pharmaceutical side, but you will also need to comply with all of the relevant general safety and performance requirements of the MDR. So you really do need to tick all the boxes from both sides. You can also have co-packaged products, which means that it's just that the device is available in the same package as the pharmaceutical. Now, here we come to a separation, same as with the referenced ones. If you make clinic claims on usage, you will need to show that it's accurate and that you've estimated the risks. And those devices will always need to meet the requirements of the MDR, the general safety and performance requirements. But when you're co-packaged or referenced, if the device section comes from a different company, from a partnering company, it is their responsibility as the legal manufacturer unless you take that on yourself. But be very careful with these things. And if you're planning on working with a partner on this, make sure that your partner is knowledgeable enough and that you're knowledgeable enough on the medical device side as well to know that everything is going as planned, because it's a tricky path. When the medical device is the principal one, like I discussed previously, the pharmaceutical can act as an ancillary to either help the function of the medical device or to prevent adverse events. But now when we look at what the notified body has to do in order to give you certification on the product, first of all, they need to verify that the ancillary substance is useful part of the medical device. So you will need to provide all the information on the pharmaceutical side as well, so that they can see the usefulness. You need to make your claims and show them to be true. Notified bodies are also required to seek scientific advice from the competent authorities designated by the European Medical Agency. That includes assessing the benefit-risk profile of the incorporation of the substance into the device. So again, you will need all the pharmaceutical side as well. And you will need to show this combination to be safe. And if the substance in working as an ancillary is a human blood derivative, they need to consult EMA directly. So it's not only a national authority, but it goes directly to EMA. Let me see if I can get this one here. Okay, so a couple of other things when you're combining and dealing with the regulatories. Unlike the previous directives for the medical devices, the MDR also states that the notified body may not deliver a certificate if the opinion from the pharmaceutical authority is unfavorable. So they cannot, they're required to ask for the opinion, and they're required to act the way it's given in accordance to that. Also, something interesting on the medical device side. Some medical devices might be some material that will be absorbed in the body in the long run, but the function is only mechanical. So there's no pharmaceutical function. But in order for you to include all information necessary, you might still need to, depending on the substances used in the material, you might need to have understanding on ADME and possibly even pharmacokinetics, depending on the product. But this is not actually a combination product, obviously, because it's not a it doesn't include a pharmaceutical, so there's no pharmaceutical action in the device. But it's a curiosity point for those who are working with medical devices that could be implanted and expected to be absorbed. So where are we going with next with the combination products? One of the big development areas is the digital bill. So prescription medication can be combined with the ingestible sensor component. You can monitor blood levels. You could possibly monitor biomarkers, control dosages, and achieve actual individual treatment options. Sounds good, right? That's where we're headed, but it presents some risks. Other areas of digital medicine include observation of patient conditions. So streamlining treatment plans, patient compliance monitoring, and digital health management systems. These actually, I just included these here because when talking about digital medicine, people tend to understand it in several different ways. The true one, or the one that most actually understand with digital medicine is when you actually use some kind of digital component in your medication. But there's a lot of different kind of systems that are also included in digital medicine, and the combination of these will be intertwining more and more all the time. And digitality is taking over very strongly, all the way from like actual being inside an actual product to monitoring everything. So what are the concerns and possibilities with these? Well, whenever you have a software, if you have digital parts, you will have software. And wherever you have software that connects to something, you have to consider cybersecurity. This is also a big rising trend, and very much required by the authorities these days, for you to check the boxes that you've considered whether there are any security issues here. There's a lot of developing technology, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, very strongly taking over everywhere. The problem is that the risks are unpredictable. Right now, for example, in the medical device field, it's not very easy to get software approved that has a continuous learning function, simply because the risks are impossible to predict. So the mainstream right now with artificial intelligence is using machine learning, then freezing your software before it reaches the market. So you can learn, you can teach it, you can use it for teaching, but the software needs to be frozen once it's there. It cannot be continuously learning. So that's one of the big interest points, and also one of the most unstable things in the regulatory field right now, because the technologies are developing and everybody can see the purpose, the possibilities that different kind of AI systems will bring, but there is no regulatory frame for it. And that's what they're changing currently. So I know there's standardization going on, and also the regulatory authorities are actually starting to step up and give guidance on these matters. If you're interested in in the AI things, there's a very good paper by Coaster that actually pulls all of this together, the MDR field, the MDR elements with the AI field, the different aspects of the AI field. So that's look it up if you're interested in this. So what's the real possibility of this is the personalized treatment, of course, to fill the different situations for in the future. I'm sure we're going there, but when, that's another question. Once we figure out a way to predict the risks. Until that, we need to kind of keep the leash a little bit tighter on development. So on combination products, the points of interest is when you start working, you have either a device that you want to be used with a pharmaceutical, or you have pharmaceutical that needs a device. What are the difficulties on your pathway? Well, first of all, even though after now with the MDR, the legislation and the requirements are fairly close together. When you understand the reason behind the different requirements, the reason is same for both pharmaceutical and medical devices. They're looking at performance and they're looking at safety. So it's just the two different fields. But when you start working, if you, for example, want to include a partner that would develop the other part, or somebody who already has a product you would like to use, when you start talking to them, make sure that you're speaking the same language. Both fields, even though they are similar and they talk about the same things, might use different words. And that might be confusing, and it might even lead to misinterpretation of discussions. And you don't want that. Make sure that you understand something on the other side as well. So don't blindly rely on your partner's expertise, because you will have, if you do that, you will have no way of actually evaluating whether they know enough. So make sure that you know what you need to know. One thing that I want to kind of bring out also is the responsibility nomenclature. There's both legislations require a specific person to be responsible for specific things. Pharma sector is talking about the qualified person, and the medical device sector is talking about the person responsible for regulatory compliance, the PRRC. These are not the same thing. They have different functions, but it's an easy one to kind of miss. If you understand one from your sector, don't expect the other who sounds to be doing this, have the same responsibilities to actually have them. They don't, they're different. The positions are different. So that's just a interest point maybe for you. So what are the more specifically the things that make this tricky? The cooperation from a regulatory perspective is hard. You need to understand both sides, but also meet the requirements on both sides. And I'm hoping that now it will be a little bit easier once the MDR brings this to the table fully for everybody. So they have the pharmaceutical side and the medical device side authorities also have clear steps that they need to take in these kind of occasions. So hopefully that'll, from the regulatory perspective, be a little bit clearer pathway from now on. Your first question, like we talked previously, is which law and regulation dominates when it comes to your product? Which one is the main principal action? And what are the differences and similarities of this when you have to consider both? How do you handle the full circle? Medical devices talk about performance. Pharmaceuticals talk about mode of action and efficacy. Both talk about safety. Knowing what you need to know and show can be confusing. Biological safety and biocompatibility, this is one of the biggest things that you need to know about and be aware of. I'll go into that a little bit more soon. Also, post-market surveillance and pharmacovigilance. The MDR has raised the bar on post-market surveillance for medical devices, and it's coming to meet the pharmacovigilance level. So that's also coming onto the same, it has come to the pretty much into the same level. But again, you will need to understand the field in order to know how to meet the expectations. One of the trickiest part also in this is risk management. That is by far probably your biggest concern because it governs everything. In Medical, for example, when we work with, for example, customers, when we would need to implement also pharmaceutical know-how, we have partners that we work with. Biocompatibility, Pharmac is one of our partners, and they have, where we have the design part, they have a lot of stuff for the post-authorization. So partnering up is not, it's very, very wise for you guys, but it's also something that we as consultant companies do. So if we look a little closer on the different sections that you need to be aware of, that can prove to be tricky if you don't know them. First, the mode of action and efficacy. So pharmaceuticals have very specific science behind it. You will need to look at the absorption, distribution, metabolism. So the full app needs to be there for you. You will need to show the pathway throughout the body. You will also need to understand and test pharmacokinetics. So how does the pharmaceutical work in the body? For the medical devices, you need technical validations. You will need, if you have software tools that you're using, you'll need software tool management, cybersecurity, as spoken before, and the safety. So once you start combining these, you will see that they all affect each other in some way. And this is where your risks start increasing and becoming more complex. If we look at the clinical testing and the evaluation part for both sides, so looking at the safety and performance or the efficacy, from the pharma side, you will have your first-in-man studies, your phase 1 that pretty much looks at the basic tolerance in healthy. Phase 2 looks at the doses, and phase 3 is the big one looking at the actual efficacy of the pharmaceutical. Your output after this for the assessment would be clinical written summary. So this would pull all your information on your clinicals and be part of your dossier. For device, the clinical evaluation has 3 different sections that you need to consider. You will need to show valid clinical association. So this basically answers the question whether what you claim your device does is actually possible. So it can be anything from showing that an X-ray machine with some kind of, for example, with software that's looking functioning as a technical person who's looking at the X-rays, you would have to show that it can actually identify the right organs and stuff. So you need to show this kind of, is it really possible thing part in your clinical evaluation to start with. Then you need to show technical performance, which means that your device is actually performing as you planned. So this is your verification and validation. When you develop, you create your user needs and your design inputs. So the technical performance is measured mostly against the inputs and some of the user needs depending on how they're formulated. But the point here is that you will need to show that you actually created what you meant to create. Clinical performance, on the other hand, this can be a very, very, very vast area. One thing that the MVR has brought in is the usability is now a requirement. This clinical performance area actually answers whether the need that the device was meant to be created for was met. So this validation usually is for the users. You start by showing what you want to create, you create it, and then you will need to show that you actually created something that functions and does what you intended it to do, and not only technically, but in clinical settings for any kind of claim you make for the performance and clinical benefit you make, claims that you make. The output of the clinical evaluation for devices is the clinical evaluation report. And this is a living document. You're required to update it. If you have a risk level classification level 1 device, it's when necessary, but anything from that, you are required to specify when you'll update it. For the highest risk classes, it's yearly. So that's also something to be aware of, that these, especially with the medical device sector now, these are living documents that are expected to be updated. Both areas, of course, in the end, will do a benefit risk assessment that is the basis of the claims for safety when when you want to gain market approval or have a medical device certified, CE certified. So I want to talk about the biocompatibility a little bit more. I'm running out of time a little bit maybe, but we'll go through this anyway. This is one of the biggest things that you need to consider when you're combining pharmaceuticals and medical devices. You need to understand that both affect the other. So the effects of the ingredients in the pharmaceutical, remember, there's not only the pharmaceutical that has the actual action on a human body, it's also the excipients. It may have an effect on your medical device. And there have been occasions where medical devices were created and combined with different sets of pharmaceuticals that have maybe different excipients. And what was tested was only certain ones. And once in use, it was noticed that with some combinations, there were more adverse events. But what happens is that if they're not compatible, the medical device can create more leachables. So when this happens, depending on what's leaching out, your toxicology will spike up. So these are very, very important things for you to consider in development. First of all, if you're developing a pharmaceutical and you want it to be used with a medical device, that's easier for you if you want to pick one. But if you want to pick several that are in direct contact with your pharmaceutical, then you will need to test them all. Same with the medical devices. If you produce an insulin pump, you either test it with the different insulins, or you specify which one you use. For justification, you can look at what are the ingredients in the pharmaceutical. You might be able to pull some labels, but be very, very careful with that, because this is something that has been shown in many occasions that this actually happens. And also remember that the device materials might have the effect on the activity of the pharmaceutical. Same thing. Or for example, if you're clueless, basically, you might build a device that actually the interior binds peptides, and you put in a biological pharmaceutical and it sticks to the walls. Might be a huge issue in when you think about dosage. But so this is a big area. Please pay attention to it, and make sure you fully understand what can affect what in your biocompatibility issues. Post-market surveillance, pharmacovigilance, I already covered this a little bit. life cycle model, so it needs to be continuous. Both are now proactive. So while medical device was lagging a little bit before, with the MDR now, that is requiring proactive functions as well. So in the MDR, you actually need to predefine your estimated non-serious incidents for your medical device, and then you create you track the trending of those incidents against your expectations. So that's really specific, and that needs to go into your technical file. Both obviously also have responsibilities for notification to authorities about any adverse events. So that's always been there, maybe and more specified in the MDR section now. And also for, at least with the MDR changes, what actually went down with the notifications was the times. So you need to be faster now to notify if there's any adverse events. And risk management. This is the my pet peeve and my love child in a way. This is the core of the hardness of combination products. You really, in order to map out the risk, you need to understand both sides. And this governs everything from design and development to post-market and post-authorization actions. The risk can be very, very, very difficult to predict. And you really, really need to understand not only both sectors, but the interrelated risks. So it's not enough to kind of read through both sides. You need competence in your team to actually understand the science behind it, so that they can map out whether there are some relevant new risks. Okay, so just kind of last, don't trip along the way things to keep in mind. Make sure your team has the right confidence. Remember the biocompatibility. And then one thing that I want to again point out is there's such a thing as equivalence, both in pharmaceutical and medical device side. But that can be used for example, with medical device, both pharmaceuticals and medical devices, to get accepted or get authorization to enter the market. You can use equivalence to prove your safety and performance if you can show that the equivalence is enough, that they're equivalent enough. And with both, I mean, it's fairly specific what the equivalence entails. But when you combine a pharmaceutical and medical device, even if you're using exactly the same pharmaceutical, you cannot claim equivalence to safety material of a pharmaceutical if you're using it with a medical device, nor can you claim the safety of a medical device tested alone to prove the safety of the combination. You need to evaluate them always together. So keep in mind that you cannot use the equivalence card unless the whole package is equivalent. So considerations for your journey. Choose your partner wisely. Choose preferably early in development to get the mutual guidance going and discussion. You'll learn from the other side all the time. And if you're unsure of any area, get help from consultants if necessary. And it's not only information, but these are a lot of work, a lot of documentation. So you need a pair of hands, get the help. Especially with the medical device, it's very typical that people don't understand how resource intensive everything is. So you might have a startup that is has a really good product coming up, and they want to start moving towards the CE assessment. They might have a timeline because the development is almost there, but they have no idea how much time it actually takes if they start writing the documentation themselves. And a lot of that documentation actually should have been written all along. So make sure that you understand the path that you're going for. The drug and device combinations that will follow medical device class 3 procedure and additional EMA or medicine competent authority consultation is required by the MDR. This is in the cases where the device is has the primary function and the pharmaceuticals is the ancillary. But if it's integral, it's class 3, so it's highest risk class. Median European Medicine Agency approval time for active substances in 2019 was 423 days. Today, the notified bodies are estimating that the MDR assessment for devices can take from 6 to 12 months. And this is even with no delays or no additional documentation asked. So the timelines are fairly heavy. Consider very clearly what your core competencies are and utilize experts. That will help to achieve faster time to market for you guys. If you start learning from scratch and just want to keep it in your own fingertips, there's a very real chance that by the time you're ready, the technology is old. So get the competence that you need in your team, be it internal or external. That's probably the best or the best advice I can give. Well, that's it from me. I will hand this over to David now. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was helpful and interesting. Please do contact me if you have any questions later on, or if you want to connect with Innocus in any way.
And thank you very much, Satu. I'm quite sure that several of the participants will contact you, because actually we have a lot more questions that you have than you have time to answer today. But I think we should pick a few of them, and let me just start by asking you if you can give an example on how cybersecurity might be a concern.
Yeah, that is something that a lot of times people ask, because they might consider their device as something that doesn't really have cybersecurity issues, or it doesn't. It's not something that somebody would attack. But if your device actually communicates in any way with any kind of electronic patient record system or hospital network or something, there's a lot of other stuff hooked up to that as well. And your cybersecurity could be both ways. You could actually open up something that will allow somebody to gain access to those networks, and then affect somebody's insulin pump, affected dosages. Or you could be the insulin pump. You don't open up cybersecurity issue, but if you're connected to a hospital network, if something gets in there, is your product safe? So anytime you have software that is connecting somewhere, you need to consider this. And even if it's not connecting, I seriously suggest that in your technical documentation, you kind of tick the box, you provide justification why this is not applicable for your device, because they will ask unless you do.
Okay, I have a few more questions. I think we can do about 2 or 3 more. A very specific question. A bandage which contains pharmaceutical substance but acts only on the skin surface, do you need to prove that it does not absorb into the system? And is this kind of medical device considered a combined product?
Yeah, it is a combined product, but you need to, again, whether it's a medical device or pharmaceutical will depend on which one is the primary actor. So if the primary therapeutic actor is the pharmaceutical, that will be a pharmaceutical product with a medical device applicator. So this is what you need to look at. Which one is the primary actor in which one provides the therapeutic action. But whether you need to prove that it does not absorb into the system, you will probably need to address this issue, but it depends on what the product is and how you can, if you can justify that there's no way it can reach in the concentration level that would do any harm. You need to probably provide some kind of justification for not doing, whether you need to, or so that you won't need to actually look into the systematic blood circulation levels. Okay. Maybe that was, hopefully that wasn't too unclear. Please contact me.
I think we have time for one more question, and I can see some of our participants also actually did use the chat function and not the Q&A function. One of the question goes, do you have examples of biological combination products?
Biological combination products, meaning if this means biological medication combined with a medical device.
I guess that's what's meant.
Yeah, if that's what it's meant by that, then for example, there's osteoporosis medication called teriparatide. It's a peptide, biological peptide that is produced. And that is actually, for example, sold as an integral device system. So it has the monthly dosage of the teriparatide that is delivered at one specific dose each day during a month, and you have the syringe. It's fully locked in. The only thing you need is a needle, and then you dispose it after you've used the last dose. So yes, that would be a example of that kind of biological medication with the device, an integral package.
Okay, we're running a little over time here. We will gather the questions that we didn't have time for and forward them to you, Satu. And then it's just for me on behalf of Medicon Valley Alliance to say, hope to see you later. I hope it's been time well spent and that you have appetite for more Medicon Valley Alliance events in the future and more Medicon Valley Alliance Innokas medical events. As mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to me if you want to know more about this and other MVA event concepts. And of course, finally, I would like to thank you, Satu, and Iver from Innokas Medical, who made this webinar possible. We had between 75 to 85 participants, which I think is quite good, and that's also why there were so many questions. With that said, I think we have reached our destination, and I will conclude this inspirational webinar. Take care out there.
Yep, thank you from my side as well. Please keep in mind what David said in the beginning. Linda Kelbert from Innokas Medicals will be telling you all about how to compile with the ISO 13485 quality system standard. What does it actually mean? and that she's awesome in that. Tune up for that as well. That's on the 27th of October, was it?
Exactly. Hope to see you all there.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.